As you've been hearing on the news this morning, a new sexual assault policy is in place for the first time on Ontario campuses. It is meant to protect people who come forward to report being sexually assaulted. About a fifth of all female students will be sexually assaulted over the course of their career. That, according to American research, which experts say reflects the reality here in Ontario as well. Some students who reported their assault to their school in the past say the experience traumatized them. How do the new policies, first implemented in January, stack up, and are they making a difference? CBC Toronto's Lisa Shing is examining that this week in a special series. Good morning.
Good morning, Matt.
You're looking at this through the stories of survivors. What are you hearing from the survivors?
Well, I want to tell you the story of one survivor who contacted me 6 months ago, and one of the many I've spoken with since. Her experience reporting her rape led her to file a human rights complaint against her former school. That's the University of Ontario Institute of Technology in Oshawa. Now, this young woman's name is Sanching, and we're just using her first name and disguising her voice to protect her identity. Now, before her alleged assault, she was a varsity rower, top of her class, and she was just accepted into a university program in Windsor. So one summer weekend, she and her boyfriend at the time, who was also a rower, drove down to look for housing. Here's what happened there in her own words.
I remember just having the 2 glasses of wine. I just remember telling him that I wasn't feeling well. Yeah, just not remembering anything after that. I didn't feel too good. I felt really sore. I looked under the sheets and I was covered in blood.
So she went to the hospital a few days later, and pharmacy records show she had to take medication for that bleeding.
What happened then?
She decided against going to police at the time, like most survivors, and instead turned to her school in Oshawa for help. She was on the rowing team that summer, also working on campus as well. Now, this was right around the time all universities and colleges in the province had to have a sexual assault policy in place. Her school had that policy online, and it was only after Sanching read it that she decided to report what happened to her. Now, a month later, the school went back, told her that sexual assault policy was just a draft and it had to investigate under their student code of conduct instead, which doesn't really cover sexual assaults at all. Now, this was just the first of many issues that she says re-victimized her over the course of her investigation.
They would call me on a Friday afternoon asking if I was sure there was no consent, for instance. During the appeal process, they asked how much I would drink on a regular basis. I want change. I know I'm not the first student and I'm not going to be the last student who will come forward, and I want the university to understand that, understanding that they can't do what they did to me.
And it doesn't stop there, Matt. 3 months after she came forward, the school decided Sanching did not consent, which is a positive outcome for her, but she thought her ex-boyfriend's punishment was too light. He was suspended from school and rowing for a year, but the investigation took so long, the rowing season had already wrapped up by then, and he had to write a 2,000-word essay. The ex-boyfriend appealed just one of the sanctions, that he couldn't take courses for a year. Now, during this appeal, Sanching had to gather more records from the hospital, the pharmacy, character references from her friends even. And she says this entire 6-month process made her relive what happened over and over, and that is why she filed the human rights complaint. Now, the Oshawa school confirms it received that complaint, but isn't saying much more than that because of confidentiality.
The sexual assault policies that were put in place ostensibly to protect women like this. How are those policies working?
Well, after speaking with students and experts, it became pretty clear there's no consistency or clarity with these policies across campuses. I read through about 7 of them. Some of them address rape culture on campus. Others don't mention it at all. Very few give clear timelines for investigations. York's was one of the few, saying they have to be wrapped up in under 60 days. Now, other schools like Carleton's have gag orders saying you can't go to media or post on social media about your experiences during the course of the investigation, and a lot of the language in these policies leave a lot of room for interpretation as well.
What do the students that you've been talking to, what sort of policy do they want?
Well, students want them to acknowledge rape culture on campus and rape shield protection, which essentially means you can't ask about someone's sexual history. They want immunity clauses for underage alcohol and drug use, protection from face-to-face encounters with their alleged offenders, and, as I said, clear timelines for investigations, and none of them wanted gag orders. But more than anything, Matt, everyone is asking for more accountability, and that doesn't quite exist right now. Here's Sammy Pritchard, a spokesperson with the Canadian Federation of Students.
There's no oversight in these policies. There has to be accountability measures in place so that if students are dissatisfied, they can report those incidents, they can report their concerns with that policy. So we're calling for an accountability body through the government, sexual violence specific governing body where students can report these matters or anyone else can report these matters and their problems with the policies. It's a huge issue. If students don't feel that they'll be taken seriously and that they have nowhere to report their concerns, the chances are that students will discontinue reporting altogether, and that's a bigger red flag for us.
The province mandated that these schools put these policies in place. So where's the province's responsibility in all of this?
Well, it gave the schools pretty loose guidelines for a reason when it came to writing these policies. It does admit it's hard work, but it didn't really want to be prescriptive and wanted these schools to develop these policies themselves because every single one is different. Here's the Minister of Advanced Education and Skills Development, Deb Matthews.
We wrestled with that, right? I mean, we could have chosen to write the policy for every university and every college right here in downtown Toronto. We chose to actually have those policies created right where they are going to be delivered. We thought it was better to have that dialogue on campus.
So it's been 9 months since these policies were put into place, and the province says it does want to get a sense of how they're working on campuses. So it's going to be collecting data in two ways. Schools will be required to start reporting on things like the number of formal investigations it's doing, but other kind of data has not been finalized yet. And every 3 years, students will be sent what's called a campus climate survey. The first one should be going out around spring. That's also still being finalized. So some say this is a great step in the right direction, but certainly no argument among the people I spoke with that there's still a long way to go when it comes to understanding and properly dealing with survivors of sexual assault.
Just finally, what's happening to and with the young woman that you told us about at the beginning?
So currently, Sanching is going into mediation with the Oshawa School, which puts the human rights complaint on hold for now. She still has trouble sleeping, is dealing with anxiety, certainly doesn't row anymore, and tells me facing the fallout of sexual assault is really something that nobody should have to go through. Despite all this, though, she is starting her second year at the University of Windsor right now.
Lisa, thank you.
No problem.
This is CBC's Lisa Shing. We should add that the University of Ontario Institute of Technology contacted us late last week. It denies Sanching's allegations that they mishandled their investigation into her case. You can check out Lisa's story at cbcnews.ca/Toronto, and you'll hear more of her series in the days to come.